All right, and welcome back to Module 4 of the Miller System with myself, Stephen Summers, and of course, Mr. Jim Miller. This module is all about authority, and it's the first phase in the conversion call process that we outlined to you in Module 2. So we're at a position now in the system where we understand that our limiting beliefs hold us back. We understand all that kind of stuff from Module 1. We understand how to overcome those beliefs and break through to this new identity, more powerful identity that we have now within ourselves. Then in Module 2, we went through the entire conversion call process. This now in Module 4 is just going deeper into the process to give you the step-by-step within each of the 4 phases. And of course, in Module 3, just to bring us up to speed, we talked about state, how to get into state, how to get our clients into state or our prospects into state, and all of that, very, very important to make the conversion call process actually work. So where we are now, we're in the first phase where we're looking to create authority. So I'm going to have Jim come in now and talk to us a little bit about what is authority, and then, of course, why is it important? And finally, how do we actually create authority on the call early on and go from there? So Jim, I'm ready to rock. Are you ready to rock, sir?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is an extraordinary topic, and one that, for the most part, is the linchpin to the entire consultative and conversion technique that is so extraordinarily successful if mastered. So I'd like to begin by stating that when prospects come to us, they come to us with an identity, and that identity is a seeker, one who is seeking. They're in that frame of wanting to know, hoping to find. Some of them may be skeptical, some of them may be assumptive, some of them may be, unrealistically hopeful, but whatever the case may be, everyone is coming to the game with an identity. And that identity is certainly appropriate for us to exert our authority into, because we are presenting ourselves as a coach or a consultant. Now, what happens and where the whole thing breaks down is when we step out of that role and we start assuming the role of salesman. And this is where the whole process breaks down. Because what happens when we step out of that role, when we're at one point when we become incongruent, then the entire process starts unraveling, because our identity and their identity starts to become blurred and become obtuse for the most part. So what I'd like to suggest is this, is that authority is an identity. It's an identity that we are able to achieve and assume, and to be consistent in all of our business and building a consulting business, building a coaching business. The authority that we're able to assume comes from one thing. The foundation of authority is legitimacy, meaning that we are perceived by a prospect or by a client as being a legitimate authority figure. And if we present ourselves correctly, when we present ourselves correctly to our prospects, then there is a legitimate assumption that the prospect or the client has. So as a result, they will frame themselves in an identity that will enable them and will position them to be obedient to our authority. You see, this is the beautiful thing about persuading and influencing from the authoritative coaching or consultative personality, right? So the legitimacy and the authority go together. It is very natural to be an authority figure as a coach and a consultant, and it really is what our clients and our prospects expect out of us. So much so that they are willing to be suggestive, to adhere to our suggestions, to obey, and I don't mean a blind obedience, but I do mean to certainly obey what it is that we recommend to them, because again, they're perceiving us as legitimate.
Yeah, that's really good. I think one of the things, Jim, this you may cover this a little later, or this is maybe for now, but I think some people may be wondering to themselves two things. Number one, if I don't, due to some limiting belief, feel that I'm legitimately authoritative, how is it that I'm able to know the difference between what's legitimate and what's in my head that I'm holding myself back?
Well, that's a good question because, like I said, most people that are coming to us are coming to us as seekers. They have found something intriguing in our marketing. They have found something or have heard something from a colleague that maybe referred you that you would be able to provide them some sort of direction, some sort of advancement in their business or their personal life. So if we feel that we do not have an authority or legitimacy, it's probably because two reasons. Number one, because we don't. We don't have legitimacy yet. We haven't developed it, meaning that we are deficient. There's something or some things that are missing from our business, our practice, our knowledge, our experience. And the good news is that all of these can be acquired. The second thing is that we feel this way because we don't know how to stay in that role, because we've too often crossed the line between authority, friend, or salesman. And so as a result, we're inconsistent. We receive feedback from our clients that give us the feeling that we're not in control, that we're not able to persuade individuals to do what it is that we're asking them to do. And in most cases, we're talking about conversion, enrollment in our programs. So in order to achieve an authoritative legitimacy, understand that we must become something more. We must feel that we, in fact, have that which will benefit other individuals. Because if we do, if we in fact develop ourselves to that level, if we in fact can demonstrate experientially, intellectually, emotionally that we're able to provide those who seek with a solution, then we in fact have the right at that point to claim legitimacy as an authoritative figure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the second part of that then, Jim, is once we get over that, we're in a position at times when we're, say, persuading or influencing somebody who's maybe in our minds more authoritative than we are, as in like they could be a CEO of a large corporation that we're looking to influence or something along those lines. We still must feel legitimately authoritative there too, right?
Absolutely, because remember, let's look at the whole picture. And the whole picture is that CEO or that successful business person or that academician, whoever it might be, whoever she might be, is a seeker. They have come to you for answers, for solutions, for directions, you see? So the fact that they are in front of you, the fact that they've responded to your marketing lets you know that they have an identity as someone who can obey, can be influenced, is suggestible, if that's the proper word, is suggestible. We influence them correctly. If we stay in our role, if we stay in our identity, if we're congruent with what it is that we profess that we have as a solution, as a benefit to offer individuals. So there's no reason to feel inadequate. There's no reason to feel that someone is superior to us, even though they may be. There's many times that I have coached and consulted men and women that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and have done things that I could only dream of doing, but yet there was something that they felt was deficient in themselves, and they sought from me as a consultant, and I was able to provide it. So I didn't speak into that individual as a whole, because, for example, when I was working with Tony Robbins, there was so much that he had done in his life that you can't even imagine. There's so much more about him that he doesn't present to the general public. So in speaking to him, it would be very easy for me to get quite intimidated. But yet, there were things that he came to me for, seeking answers, seeking advice, and I spoke into that seeking. right? So as not to be intimidated. And I stayed congruent and stayed powerful, stayed in an alpha positioning by focusing in on providing a solution to what it is that he was seeking.
That's amazing. And this then brings us on nicely to assumptive positioning as an authority. We assume at all times that we are an authority. We assume that position. If you want to just go a little deeper on that, Jim, and then I think we're in a really great position at that point to jump into the 4 steps of the process.
Well, listen, Dr. Robert Keegan at Harvard University wrote a great book with Lisa Leahy called Immunity to Change, one of the best books that's been written in my life that I've read that's not a classic. What he says is that the mind has a complexity to it, and it begins from the infant state all the way up, but the last 3 stages where we're going from the teenage years to maybe in our late 20s, he calls the socialized mind. And this is a mind where we're basically looking to fit in. We're looking to get cues from other people because we want to be part of the group. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be isolated, right? And you can imagine in our teens and in our 20s how powerful that dynamic is. Well, eventually, hopefully, we move into a more complex state of mind, which is called the self-authoring mind. And the self-authoring mind, not authoring as in writing a book, but authoring as in creating, as we are the author, we are the authority within our lives now. We don't look to others. We don't seek authority. We don't seek direction. We don't seek identity from others to fit in. We now are looking more to ourselves to develop this independency that we have, this ability where we're able to step back from the social environment to generate an internal seat of judgment or personal authority that evaluates and makes choices about external expectations. And by the way, I was just quoting the book there. So now, as the authority, what we want to do is, again, contemplate on what it is that we have to offer and truly come to terms with it. Right? Come to terms with the fact that we have a value that the world is seeking, that our clients, that our tribe is looking for, and they're coming to us as the authority figure, as the shaman, if you will, to sit down in front of the fire and listen to us, give them advice, and give them words of wisdom, right? And it's important to have wise words. So, of course, we're reading at an intellectual level regularly. We're doing research. We're Googling into academic papers. We're putting ourselves in front of more knowledgeable people that can enhance what it is and who it is we are, what it is we have to offer. So we're constantly building ourselves, building value within ourselves so that at some point we become the value. We become that, as Jay Abraham says, that source of preeminence in his book. So assumptive positioning means that I assume that as the authority, as the one who is the expert in what it is I have to offer, then I'm going to position myself as expecting that you are coming to me to engage, that you're seeking is not in vain, that it's not something that you're doing willy-nilly, but in fact you are looking for someone that you can engage with. And so I speak to you in assumptive terms. I speak to you as if you already are a client of mine from your prospect positioning, because I'm assuming that there is no one that can more effectively provide solution and provide answers to what it is that you seek.
Yeah, it's a strong frame to start from. That's for sure. So within this authority frame, we have 4 steps. If there's anything else you want to cover before we jump in, we can do that now, or we can just go into the first phase, which is the time capture.
We can talk about authority. It is, like I said, the linchpin of everything that we do, because the coaching and the consulting role that we have, for the most part, implies that we are and we have authority, and that our authority is legitimate. So if we believe that, if we come to terms that, if there's an internal acceptance of the fact that we have a legitimacy to our authority, then we can speak from that role, from that alpha positioning, and not move into or drop into or descend into the hell of being a salesman, right? Of selling, where we've basically given up the seat of authority, given up all legitimacy, and have become, for the most part, a beggar, right? Please, please give me your money, give me your business. It's despicable. So let's get into the authority frame. In other words, what the authority frame is we're going to from the beginning, frame ourselves as the authority figure. Because remember, as we're framing ourselves as the authority figure, we're also consequently framing the prospect or framing the client as the obedient figure in the conversation, one that will, for the most part, obey. Again, not in a you can guess for yourself what I mean. What I mean is that a person that will be suggestive, meaning that they will listen to, they will conform to, they will believe, and they will be motivated to do what it is that we suggest. So we're going to frame ourselves as the authority figure from the beginning. And one of the things, if you read negotiation books, if you read, for example, Max Bazerman, who is one of the principal figures in the program of negotiation at Harvard University, what he says is that it's very important. Also, Herb Cohen, who wrote an excellent book on negotiation. Both of these men, and virtually anyone who's an expert in negotiation, says that the first thing we must capture is the time. The time must be owned by us, because if at any moment the client, the prospect, takes control of time, meaning that they cut us off, or that they try to put us into a time capsule, meaning that, listen, I've only got, an example would be, listen, I've only got 15 minutes to talk, when you know this is going to take longer than 30 minutes, well, there's no sense in even having the conversation, because they own the time. So we must own the time. We must make certain that there is time available, but more importantly, that time is no longer relevant. That we basically create a conversation, we create a feeling that time doesn't exist, right? Many of your clients will actually tell you, my goodness, I can't believe we've been talking this long. It certainly hasn't felt that way. So how is it that we capture time? Well, the first thing we do is we let people know that we have been, first of all, quite expecting of this conversation and have put much preparation into it so that we can make the best use of the time that we have available. And this time is precious. You see, we start giving definition to time. We start giving value to it. This time is precious. Why? Because it's within this conversation that will be very personal. That will be very personal, so that I can get to know you at an intimate level, not so much only you, but also your desires, aspirations, challenges that you face, the beliefs that are putting these limiting boundaries upon you. It's very important that within this time that we spend together, right, that we get to know you and get to know why it is you're here as I said, at a very intimate level. So the time that we spend together is very important to me, and I'm hoping as well that it will be that important to you. Keyword, that you're available to spend this time with me, that you're available to whatever is necessary to sit in the conversation, to stay in the conversation, and be available to exchange information, ideas, concerns with me, so that we can arrive at an intention, we can arrive at a conclusion, we can arrive at something that's going to move your life forward. And I'm going to ask that you agree with me, that you make yourself available for a conversation of this type that maybe you've never had before. Where we suspend time and we're able to talk at this level, right? Without concern, without pressure, without the noise of society, and really to put the blinders on and just really seal ourselves off so that it's just you and I and the conversation, which is the three of us. Fair enough? And I get that commitment, you see. because I want to create this mystical importance, this mystical identity of the time that is necessary, that we have available for this very, very important conversation that could be, for them, very transformational, and actually should be very transformational in their lives, where their lives will change at the other end of what it is that we do.
I think, Jim, this brings up an important point as well, which is within the marketing, which of course I'll be taking you through within the system. A big part of this is that the people coming to this call, they've already done some work to get here, as in they've answered your questionnaire. They've likely watched a case study video or something along those lines at this point. They're, as Jim says, expectant. They come to this call looking for answers, and so they're very open to this part of the call, I can tell you from my experience. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Jim, is, and people will come across this from time to time, sometimes you get clients or prospects who are very qualified. They're somebody who should enroll in the program. However, they kind of come on the call and they start the conversation themselves. They'll tell you what's going on right now, all the challenges, literally immediately, without you even really having said hello. So what do we do in that situation with this time capture?
Well, there's two choices. The first choice is to let them ramble on and take control as the authority figure in the conversation. Or the second choice, which is the right choice, is to interrupt, to master the ability to interrupt. You see, as a consultant and as a coach, we have the legitimacy, we have the authority to control the conversation. So when a prospect or a client starts either taking over the conversation or focuses in on an area that is not relevant to the question that I asked, then I interrupt them. And the interruption goes something like this. Stephen, let me interrupt you for a minute. That's it. That interruption, you keep it nice and simple and look for opportunity to interrupt, because what it does is assert your authority in the conversation. You see, you are the alpha positioning. You are the one who is controlling the conversation. Become congruent. And interruption and taking control back of the conversation is certainly congruent with being an authority figure, is it not?
Absolutely. I think another thing I wanted to ask you, Jim, was I know with Aaron Claff, with his system, which we mentioned in previous modules, one of the big things he tends to do early on, as you know, is frame time by saying, okay, so we've got about 20 minutes, and off he goes. He tells the people that he's pitching to, which is now a different dynamic to what we're creating here. I just wanted to know, is that something you do? Like, you actually let them know how long this may take, or is that something we avoid?
In step C of the authority frame, you see we're going to define the process. And in defining the process, we can mention a time that could be the amount of time that we use for the conversation, right? If necessary, we will use as much time as available.
And I know from experience that these calls, you may even say they're going to take 30 minutes. You may say this will be a 30-minute call, but at times they go on, as you had said earlier on, Jim. I've seen it happen. They can go for 45 minutes to maybe an hour with some prospects, and that's fine. And I've had exactly what you said. While following this system, I've had people turn around and say to me, "Well, I can't believe it's been 45 minutes." And some people have even kind of said to me, basically they said, "I understand that you have to go now. I'm going to enroll in the program immediately, but I could have talked to you all day." And this is down literally to the system that you're listening to at the moment. So it's phenomenally powerful.
Correct. So I guess we move now into step B, self-edification, which really is, it's very important at this point to let the person know or remind them who it is you are, why it is you have authority, right? It's because there's a frame called the why because frame, right? Why is it that the client should relinquish authority to you? Well, because this is who I am. And this is who I am within this discipline that you've come seeking solution, advice, resolution, whatever it is that you're seeking. And so self-edification is basically, I wouldn't call it a bragging about yourself, but it's just a reminder. So, I generally start off by saying, Stephen, you may know a few things about me from the marketing that I've done, but just to remind you a couple of things. And as the vice president of Tony Robbins, we were able to take a company that for the most part was on the verge of bankruptcy and within 2 years generate more net income in 1 year than the history of the company combined. And we were able to do that with many of the techniques and strategies that we're teaching in this program. Also with T. Harv Eker, we were able to take a company that was several $1 million in the red, and within a 2-year period, the company was sold for, well, let's say in double-digit millions of dollars. So these things, and as well as being COO of one of the largest telecom companies in Sweden, president and CEO of my own consulting firm. And so the reason that I tell you this, Stephen, is so that you have more of an insight into me and my experience. I was fortunate to have many accomplishments, had a lot of good people surrounding me, but I've got to tell you, I have to give a lot of credit to the strategy and the system that I was able to pass and transfer to those who worked with me, to my managers, to my sales consultants, and I hope to share those with you this evening as well.
Yeah, exactly. And in the webinar process that we tend to do within our company here and within other companies that I'm involved in, this is really all about qualification, qualifying oneself. And I think as well, something that the Jim you bring up there is if you were speaking to a coach or consultant type person, you would localize your qualification, the things you've achieved in your career to suit that conversation. And then obviously if you're speaking to somebody else in a different way, you would do the same thing, right?
Yes, exactly, because that's what they need to hear. Again, the seeker needs to be fulfilled. And so what we're doing, as long as we're focusing on providing sufficiently, even abundantly, the solution that the seeker desires, then we're being congruent with who we are. The coach is there to fulfill the expectation, or maybe even to enhance the expectation, to bring out the expectation and fulfill it at a greater level. So it's very important in the beginning to give satisfaction, if you will, to the seeker that you are in fact qualified. There is a legitimacy to your authority, and therefore they feel comfortable relinquishing their authority over to you and taking on the identity of the obedient one.
I think as well, Jim, this is a good time to talk about something that no doubt you listening and watching this program have heard Jim say, and he says things all the time like speaking into and speaking into listening and these kinds of things. They can sound quite esoteric concepts. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind briefly breaking down what you mean there, because in this situation, the self-edification phase specifically, there's certain things people are listening for. So what does all of this mean and how do we do it?
What does all of this mean and how do we do it? Boy, what an open-ended question, Stephen. But why don't you give me an easy one, like define the universe?
Relating, of course, to speaking into listening, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'm also very impressed by your polysyllabic use of the language there. But speaking into listening is very important. It's a strong dynamic. What it means is that you're able to focus in, to really, in order to control the conversation, in order to remain in the seat of authority, we must know where it is that we are and where it is our prospect is at all times during the conversation. So, for example, I know that people come to me as seekers. So as a result, what I do is I give them certainty that what it is that they seek is in fact available in the conversation. So I start by framing the possibility as very probable. So we move from possibility to probability. And this is something that a seeker really desires because they come with They might come with experiential disappointments. They might come with no experience at all, and as a result, they're fearful. Or they might come with critical filters, being very, very harsh and very suspicious of anyone who's claiming to provide an answer or solution to what it is that they seek. So it's very important from the beginning to speak into the seeker's desires, the seeker's mind. So I'd like to find out exactly where that person's coming from. And I'll do this by simply asking questions. It's a beautiful thing as a consultant from the authoritative role. We have the ability and the right to ask any and as many questions as possible, as long as they're relevant, as long as they're continuously making sense to the conversation. So a simple question, like, for example, it might be, Stephen, just out of curiosity and for my own curiosity, have you ever been involved in a coaching program? And if so, what was the result that you were able to achieve? Were you disappointed? Were you satisfied? Tell me. And from there, I'll know exactly where they are. No, I've never had a coaching program before, Jim. This is the first one that I'm considering. Or, yes, I've had, as a matter of fact, I'm in one or two right now, and et cetera, et cetera. Or, yes, I have, but I've been disappointed, so I'm kind of suspicious and hopeful that yours might be different, right? And so I know how to now speak into them to give them certainty, right, without selling them. So, for example, if someone says to me, Jim, I've been in programs before, and, I heard a lot of stuff that I already know, and really what was somewhat disappointing, I spent a lot of money, $5,000, and didn't really come away with much, right? Now, there's a big opportunity to go wrong here, and that is to make a promise by saying, well, my program's a lot better. You're going to find out that you're going to get some great results. I'm really excited to get started with you. And I hear this from coaches and consultants all the time. They go into that salesman mode. They put on that checkered jacket and they're ready to sell, right? They're ready to sell that beautiful new used Pontiac, that 2003 BMW, and they're just ready to. Ain't she a beauty, right? No, we don't want to go there, right? So we want to stay in the authoritative role. So when someone tells me that they hope they're looking, basically my response is, well, it's very interesting, and we'll take a look at things and we'll decide together whether or not this program is what it is that you're seeking. If it provides a solution, if you find value in it, well, then we can consider what the next step is from there. Fair enough? You see, it's never jumping into the hoop or jumping through the hoop, right? It's staying back. You're the authority figure. You're the one who is basically setting the pace of this whole thing. So speaking into is very important. How it is you respond, how it is you question, being able to identify where the individual is, where that seeker is in that moment in the conversation, and being able to give them certainty without selling. And that can sound something like this. Listen, Stephen, I'm certain that there is an available opportunity that we can discover together through this conversation. That's my hope. I'm very certain, if you're basically like any other client that I've spoken to, I'm quite certain that in the end we'll come to a very beneficial conclusion that could be transformative in your life. But we'll see. Fair enough?
Exactly. So in the self-edification phase, just to wrap this up, Jim, we start with telling the prospect about ourselves, who we are, what we've achieved in our careers, move on there to likely asking a question in around what you asked, which was in the ballpark of asking them about, have they been through a program like this in the past? And they'll then respond. And so at that point, we're going to know where they are. We're going to know the kinds of things that we have the opportunity to say to them, to give them the certainty that they're looking for. And then we move into what you've just talked about there, basically. Is that about right before we move into the define process?
Yeah, because it sets the stage for defining the process, because now the process can be defined in a way that is appropriate for their positioning, their framing, how it is that they're coming to us, right? So in defining the process, it's really very simple. let me role play with you, Stephen. Let me define, if you will, how it is that I see this call going forward. It's really very simple. It's the same methodology that I use for all of my clients, especially those who come from experiences or non-experiences, if that's the case, like yourself. Fair enough?
Sounds great.
The process, it starts like this. What we'll do is we'll begin by discussing, and we'll discuss this very intimately, and we'll go into quite detail, so be prepared. We'll define what it is that you have always desired, whether it be a desire that's been for many years, or whether it's a brand new desire, or even if there is no seriously or concretely defined desire, but we're going to talk about what it is that you are seeking, what it is that you've come to this call for. What is it that's burning inside of your belly? And it has been, but you haven't been able to realize it for whatever reason. But I want to hear that story that you keep telling yourself, that story that is ornamented by your hopes and your desires and your dreams, right? So we're going to talk about that first, and we'll spend some time on that. Then, from there, we're going to move into a conversation about what it is that has kept you from achieving those desires, whether they be beliefs, whether they be experiences, whether they be individuals, perceptions, whatever it is, fears, doubts, whatever it is, whether it be a lack of resources, all of these, or some of these, or one of these that you have perceived has been the obstacle that has always faced and have not been able to overcome, have not been able to achieve success as a result of. And I want to hear what those are and how they're affecting you. What type of conversations do you have in your mind as a result of their presence, right? How has it affected you? How has it affected your self-esteem? How has it frustrated you? What has it cost you, right, in your life, whether it be financially, in relationships, whatever the case may be. But I want to hear what it is that has become the nemesis to you achieving what it is that you truly desire and why it is you're here on this phone call with me today. Okay? And then in the end, you and I are going to consider whether or not you would be a candidate for a program that would basically enable you to find solutions, find resolutions, find methodologies, find availability and opportunity to overcome, to work through, to be successful in spite of the obstacles and achieve that which it is that you desire and are here on this phone call with me. But we'll determine that together. If it's appropriate, we'll discuss it. If it's not appropriate, we'll let it be. That will be our choice together. Is that fair with you?
Absolutely. And so what we're learning here, Jim, then, is that in this authority frame, in each of these steps, really, we are doing quite a lot of the talking in each of these phases, right? Each of these parts, yes.
Right, because there will be a time when the prospect or the client will do most of the talking, but it's not in the beginning. We establish authority by speaking from an authoritative level, by laying out the fact that there is opportunity to achieve what it is you seek, and by giving certainty that we are the ones that are able to bring them to the success that they desire with whatever it is that they're seeking.
And within this defined process, exactly what you just said there, which was a phenomenal monologue that anybody could literally just take and utilize in your own call. So again, everything we do here, feel free to swipe and utilize as we're doing it. But one of the things that you didn't mention there, which is fine, it may have been mentioned elsewhere, but you had said earlier on that you would usually talk about this in the defined process. You might mention how long the call like this is going to take. That would be maybe just one addition to that.
Once I get the commitment, which is the fourth element of this, the commitment to conclude, right? Before I ask for the commitment to conclude, and we've just discussed the fact that we're going to discuss the obstacles and the challenges, what I can let them know at that point is we're going to take as much time as available, because this is something that's very important. We're expecting this to be a transformational phone call where we're going to achieve an outcome. Not just a suggestion, not just advice, not just information, but in fact achieve a transformational outcome. And you will on this call using the process that we'll discuss in the next module. They will transform as a result of the cognitive dissonance process that we use. But you can let them know this is something that's going to take time. We're going to take as much time as necessary. And then we move into the commitment to conclude by letting them know, by the way, if in fact at the end you and I both determine that there is a need or that there's an opportunity to take this to the next level and actually look to achieve what it is that we desire, to achieve the overcoming, the removal, or the overwhelming of the limiting beliefs, the experiences, the perceived lack of resources, whatever it is. If we both determine that, in fact, there is opportunity, well then, there's a program that I offer that I'll discuss with you. It's quite simple. Many of my clients come to this conversation the same way that you have, and in the end we have found that it would be, in fact, beneficial for them to consider being involved in a program that can provide them the certainty and the resources to move on in life and to find the ability to actually achieve what it is that they desire. Are you good with that? They're always going to say yes. By the way, why do they say yes? Why is it that they agree in this time, at this moment, to actually consider spending money with you and being involved in your program? Why is it that they agree to that? I cannot remember a time when someone said, no, I'm not going to consider a program. There's two reasons. Number one, because we're talking at this point so intimately and so uniquely about their life. No one has spoken to them this way. Again, once you master, once you become proficient, once you've been trained and this skill set has been transferred to you, no one has talked to them this way. It's unique. Secondly, they sense and they surrender to the authority from which we're speaking. We are speaking from a powerful authoritative positioning. And so the sequence of questions, the sequence of suggestions, the domination of the conversation, all of that is designed to create an authoritative identity that they seek and that they, again, submit to. They submit to the beta positioning and will allow you to, and will acquiesce to whatever it is that you suggest in that moment. It's beautiful.
Again, I can give validity to that as well. I use this all the time when I'm speaking to prospects in different businesses that I run, and it works so well because, again, we talked about this earlier on in Module 2 relating to authority. People want to feel like they can give the responsibility to you now, even though they understand they're going to do the work, but they want to feel like I'm finally speaking to somebody who gets it, who understands me, who understands where it is I'm looking to go, and they're going to prescribe the exact steps that I must take to become successful. And I see it all the time in my calls, Jim. It's perfect. And the only other thing that we would mention here is that at this point, you also may want to record the call for the person. Would it be at this point, Jim, you would mention consenting to recording the call?
As a matter of fact, I do. I suggest to them that for their benefit as well as for mine, I record all of my calls. I provide you at no cost to you, at no additional cost to you, a copy of this call for two reasons. Number one, again, for purposes of being able to go back and reference the call, because there's so much we're going to talk about within this conversation. There's so much depth that the conversation will have. You'll probably not catch in the first listening, but you'll want to reference back to, listen to the call, and be able to listen to yourself answer these questions. It's quite an experience to listen to yourself go through a consultative type of conversation that we'll engage in. And you see, by the way, when we're doing this, we're actually creating intrigue about the conversation itself and building value of the conversation, right? The second reason is because in the event, and now here we go with the assumptive positioning, in the event that we decide to engage together at some point, what we'll do is use this call as a watermark, as a starting point, so that over time we're able to gauge our progress and able to see where it is that there might be areas that we want to focus in on and support, where other areas might be strengthened along the way. Fair enough?
Exactly.
No one ever has told me no to recording the call.
And that's huge. It's something that we talked about even in the opening webinar that you would have been on to come into this program. We mentioned that the difference here is that there's value in this call. And one of the things that I used to make a big error with before I met Jim was the calls that I had, there was no value in the call. It was just a sales call. Whereas this is a valuable call because we're not just spouting out a whole load of features and benefits about our offer and kind of asking a question about them, but we don't really give a damn. We're really interested in finding out where they are, where they're looking to go, what exactly has held them back, because we understand now with this methodology you're learning, they are the levers that are going to actually create the conversion rather than our program. Because I mean, Jim, I'm assuming right in saying that like people don't really care about our program, but they care about the fact that this is a mechanism by which they'll get what they want in life. But the program itself is irrelevant, really.
Absolutely. And so people are able to, at this point, suspend any fears of a loss of resources, any fears that they may have of spending money or of engaging or committing their time. I mean, when you frame this call this way that we've been speaking about as an authority figure, when you frame with authority the opening, the beginning of this call, you're creating so much value. You're redefining, reframing what this call is all about. And the center of this call is what? The center of this call is not you. The center of this call is not the prospect. The center of this call is the conversation, you see. Because it's within the conversation, right? Conversion, convert, conversation, right? This conversation, this of conversion that we have with them is truly going to be in their life transformational. And it's going to allow you to also be transformational, to have the authority, the transformational authority that you are now able to truly change people's lives and to impact the world with. You see? So it's the conversation that we're giving value to. And so it must be framed in the front. We must have this ante-frame, an A-N-T-E, not A-N-T-I, ante as in the beginning framing to put value to the conversation and to put authority to you. You gain the authority, the conversation gains the value. Exactly.
And the final thing to mention is you will notice at all times Jim is looking for people to agree to what he's saying. So he's saying things like fair enough and that kind of thing. And this is really what begins something we mentioned earlier as well, called the commitment cycle. So Jim, just very briefly, and we'll end this module at that point because we've certainly covered this authority frame in big detail. What is the commitment cycle and why is that important?
If you've been in sales, or if you've read sales books, or you've been associated with any type of selling, you know how important it is to get people to say yes, to get this early commitment. But let me tell you why it's important, even more so at a deeper level. Because the truth is, by asking for commitment, you are asserting authority. It's not so much that we're tricking people into saying yes, that blindly they've said yes 20 times, so at the end they can't say anything but yes. It's not some hypnotic type of tactic that we're using that's presented in sales books. By the way, throw away all your sales books. Did I say that earlier?
You have, but you can keep saying it, Jim.
All right, throw them away. Throw them away. And start hanging out in the psychology department at your Barnes and Nobles or Borders stores. Get into psychology, negotiations, influence. So the consensus, the commitment is very important, because what it does is it asserts authority from you and reminds the prospect and the client that they are in the beta positioning and they must stay in that positioning. They're not giving you permission to proceed. They're agreeing that they will continue along the path that you are going to bring them. So if I say, Stephen, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the good things, then we're going to talk about the bad things. It's going to take a certain amount of time. Fair enough? What can he say? There's no opportunity for him to say, you know what, that's unfair. I think we should spend less time on this. Again, what it is simply is an assertion of authority, and it's more or less like somewhat of a bridge to transition from one conversation into the next conversation. It's transitional. It's an easy transition in the conversation as well, right? So it gives me permission. It gives me the authority to basically change the subject now and move on. Fair enough? Good.
That's perfect. And I think with that said, that's going to end this module. We're going to jump on to the next module, which is the cognitive dissonance phase. And that's going to be a really, really exciting module, because I think that's where a lot of the magic happens. Obviously, every phase is important, but that's the one that really will create the transformation within your prospects. So, Jim, if you're happy to conclude this module, we'll end here.
Thank you for the conversation. It's just a great topic and something that I'm looking forward to have a further conversation sometime in the future with you folks.
Absolutely, Jim. Thanks.